So welcome to part two of the essentials of texturing. Today we have a little bit of a more complex setup than the past day. So of course, like if there's any questions, please make sure to ask them in the chat. Um, we did work on this material here, this paint material. I think it's looking nice. It is dark. It is at the very edge of what like PBR allows for darkness. If we have to make any corrections, we will. Um, it's got some nice, interesting details. It's nothing out of the ordinary right now. I would love to work more on it, but I don't want to get hung in the smallest of details. Essentially, I want to avoid being hyper perfectionist. Uh, let's see. I did have a second variation here, these surface scratches, that I'm not liking very much, like the way they're being projected. Maybe I can just move them a little bit just so like that to avoid like having that scratch. But like as the texture looks right now, I think we have a clear understanding that this is some sort of black paint, plastic, or something similar to that. So essentially a very well defined dielectric material, non-metallic. Okay, easy to understand. That's where we're hitting the spot, or where our benchmark is right now. Not the benchmark, but maybe our goal. Our goal is to have clearly defined materials. Okay, it is not 100% looking like this material, but I consider this one to be just a tiny bit boring without the bubbles. Okay, the bubbles will be added further in time when we actually create some sort of the blending. So far, what I'm trying to get is here, but as we spoke on the last episode, this is fakely sanded. So we are trying to create some naturally made details where and so on. Okay, so we have an interesting surface, we have an interesting noise, interesting variation without having too much going on that we cannot read the rest of the details, which is again another one of the keys why I don't want to overdo any of the basics, any of the bases, sorry, um, because I need to have some information on the next of the layers that are going to be coming, like for example this sort of brass over here, in order to understand if my materials need more or less. Sometimes by creating too much, we create noise, and this is not a good thing to have. You spend a lot of time in creating something you have to tone down later. So I prefer to do that once I have at least my masks ready. Okay, so in order to create some blending, we need a second material to blend. So right now we have created this black paint, which I'm going to group here. Actually, what I'm going to group is these variations, which I'm going to call the paint. And then I'm going to create a second material on top of this. That's going to be the brass. Let's analyze the brass really quickly. Make sure that we're creating something with intention. Okay. Other than some noise, what I can see is layers inside of this brass. We have this darker layer, this brighter layer, and everything in between. So what is this brass? If we could isolate this material, it's pretty much similar to some sort of like car paint is what I'm getting from this. I'm getting this sort of, obviously here very almost oxidated without having rust. Um, but imagine rust without the base color. Maybe it could be a good surface for this, but again, I think we would want to go no noise to begin with. And what I'm seeing is, at least in the pictures that I can see a good resolution, is this sort of like car paint sort of flaked look. And we can actually get this very easily in Substance Painter. A very good way to start with metals is going here into the physicallybase.info library. If you're unsure of what those brass values could be, like I think this is cooked, like it saved my cookies, but by default it should be displaying, I think, sRGB. You can change this to sRGB hex, okay, and you're gonna get a color copy to the clipboard. If you click here, brass, and we can start, and again, keyword here is start, defining this material like so. Okay, I'm going to make the wild guess that this base color is going to be a little bit too yellow and light. But let's see once we create our metallic and some sort of like low roughness. Okay, it definitely darkens up quite a bit, normal, because we're doing metallic. But I think we definitely want to go a little bit more red. So maybe that's a little too much. Let's do 0. Let's see what was that before. 0.127. So let's do 0.1005 maybe. Okay. Kind of yes and no. Let's do 10. Let's do 11. And that feels quite decent. Of course, that when we're talking about metals, every single channel affects the look. If I go full roughness or close to full roughness, I'm gonna get lighter values. When I go no roughness whatsoever, things are going to look darker. Of course, depending on what I am reflecting. So if I look at the display settings and I change this Tomoko Studio for something like this, then it looks very bright. And the cat is hitting on the door. So just a moment. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so this is something that is very important to keep in mind. Metals are going to react to our skylight, pretty much our lighting. Someone saying the Leica ended up being a really good model to learn texturing. Yes, it is. It has nice shapes. It has a little bit of everything. So it's a very good model for learning texturing, 100%. So let's try to get close to this bare metal. Maybe something like that, although I'll have to check maybe in this image. Of course, it depends of it, has it been scuffed or not. If it has been scuffed, then it's gonna look very shiny. If not, so we'll go some sort of in between. In this case, metallic is going to be fully on one. And I feel like this base color, again, is probably a little bit too yellow. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to click there. That looks crazy. So I think probably it is about saturation a little bit. So that's on 0.29. Let's do 3.1. Just a tiny bit more saturation, or even more than that, 3.5. Okay. And I feel like we can be fighting with the specific colors that we want to go for. We could be fighting here forever. So whatever looks decent, I'm going to go for. So maybe something like that. But like no matter how much I do on roughness and base color, for these types of materials, what I need is faceted normals. Um, I don't think I can get these effects any other way. So I'm gonna enable the normals, and Substance has these flakes, which are really good for these materials. I'll just plug that in the normals. That looks very bad right now. If I go like 5 on the tiling, maybe 15, we start to get a little bit of that car paint effect. It is really strong right now, so maybe it is a better idea to add it as a fill that we can easily control the opacity for, and also the tiling independently of the material. So I'll put this maybe like at 10%. We're getting there, but it's not tiled enough, maybe 25. And it starts to be a bit more like a noise. Okay. And it is kind of this effect that we're seeing. Maybe I can make it a little bit more interesting by doing something similar to what I did with the noises the last time. Some slow blur. So filter slow blur or blur slope. I'll do this just on the normals. We'll do an intensity of 10. And now what we get is like that effect. And maybe that's a little bit too much intensity, but we're getting some grains to be bigger and some others to be smaller, similar to what's going on here. So I think that that makes things a lot more interesting, but maybe my normals are still a little bit too strong. So let's go for 5% opacity. And looking at like a similar section of the camera, I can see that being a decent base. Again, we're not aiming for perfection right away. We're aiming to move forward. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but one of my students worded this very cleverly. Maybe like we all think this, but you know, when you word it, it becomes real. Um, Building the layers helps me see the materials that I'm doing better. So my problem, this is what my student was saying. My problem is that I was fixating too much on just one of the layers rather than building all of them and then adjusting. I'm paraphrasing, but this is essentially the message. And I think we want to keep this as a rule over here as well. Because again, if we start to get fixated on building this, then we're going to forget about everything else that's happening on this material. I think it's fair to also add this sort of height. So let's go and create something like that. I'm going to think that we can create this with some sort of fill using maybe some mold. I want to, as much as possible, I want to use starter assets. If not mold, what could that be? Let's go into grunges. Because I can have a lot of custom textures, but then that's going to be quite difficult to follow for you. Let's see. Maybe concrete dusty could be it, but I'm looking at some sort of accumulations. Hey Jack, how's it going? I think this dirt looks quite close. It's been a bit, I think, Jack, since we spoke recently. But nonetheless, I'm happy to have you here. Let's see, maybe here we can call this mold, maybe, whatever. And this is on the height. And maybe it's not such a good idea to have this on the height channel. The reason for this is, well, obviously we can see that that's a lot of, I mean, we can fix this with levels. We can go into the height channel and fix this. But in the process of converting normals to height, we're going to get a lot of like sort of lack of crispiness. And if this is something, it is crispy. Like this looks crispy, crispy. So one of the good things to do here would be to disable maybe our mold, or actually let's try to do that later. So we'll get the height going at 100%. We're going to add a filter, and that filter is going to be height to normal. This one here. So height to normal should be replacing our height, and it should be converting it to normals. Now, I think we have an incredible depth in these normals, so probably just want to do normal and height. I think we are indeed going to need to create some of that, or sorry, control some of that height because it's being super strong. So pay attention to this. Okay, if we used similar strengths, you can see how the height and the height to normal, they're slightly different. Or at least I can see that difference. Maybe with the stream, that's not a thing. Let's see. It is very similar right now. When it comes to tiling this, that's where the difference might be more apparent. Might not be using the right texture also. Okay, we're seeing very similar effects right here. Maybe they did, let's see. Maybe they fixed. Whoop. Maybe, hold on. One second. What might be happening is I might still have my height on. So I'll just do height and I'll do replace. Correct. So this is affecting my height, but it's doesn't seem to be affecting my normals. All right, there we go. Yeah, yeah. Now I can see the difference or a difference. Yeah, yeah. I think I thought that that was replacing by default because this is set to, oh, I'm looking at, yeah, that's set to replace on the height. So I thought it might be replacing that automatically. So I guess like should I pursue proving this? Maybe I'm not sure since we're doing this sort of like in a tutorial way. Like this is what we get from normals and this is what we get from height. And what I'm looking at is like a similar effect, but somehow this feels a little bit more crispy than this. It is a strange, it is a strange effect. Mm-mm-mm. We should get a bit more sharpness from this. Anyways, I'll keep going. So what I am thinking though is it worth it to have so many filters for such a subtle result? Maybe not. So I might just keep this, which also feels a little bit more controllable. And because what I need is that sort of spottiness. Like I think I'm in a good place right there. Maybe this is really strong. So let's go into the height and do something like 5%. Sorry, 50%. Yeah. Okay. I don't think this is the right filter, so I'm going to be looking for that. It is difficult to, yeah, that is similar, but yeah, tiling it so much it becomes unclear. What is it? Mold? Mold isn't giving me those. There is a very specific one. I know because I've been using it these days. Moss. Like that should be quite spotty. Yeah. Kind of like looking a little bit like the reference. Also maybe like cells, not cells, but there's anyways, whatever. That's fine. That kind of works. It creates that effect, but it's not creating the bubbles. Hmm. So while we don't want to be stuck in details, we also don't want to be rushing through the process of creating something. So it is easy to say, okay, I will not get fixated over this and do that for everything. And when you do that for everything, then you focus on nothing, or you're gonna end up having to rework your whole material. So I don't think that's good either. I think it's good to sometimes go in and be comfortable with spending a bit of time figuring out, letting the creative juices flow a little bit and be stuck and figure out and get into problem solving mode. That's completely fine. It happens to everybody, and like pretending that it doesn't is lying to everyone. So what I'm going to try is problem solve this. Maybe clamping only on height can give me that nice sort of have a very small height to be clamping. But doing something like this might be a good way to get that sort of bubbly effect. I have very, very subtle. I could just hit reset. I have very subtle effects, but what I'm looking for is something like this generally. But I don't know if that looks good. I feel like I'm going back some steps. So why don't we do something like this and maybe something like that? I know that I was comfortable around here. That doesn't make a difference. Okay, that kind of does. I mean, yeah, but again, not enough. What was I gonna say? Biggest brain fart. I guess not close enough to my reference. Maybe I need some spots in between. Something like stains. Let's try that. All right. At this point, I think it's a good moment to start building this at some sort of group. So I'll get this as a like height uh, spots, maybe, I think. Jack is asking, do you have the background black on purpose? I'm not sure. I think I think it's default. It's just that I'm using aces here. So if you're used to linear, then that's what you might know by default. But mine is aces, so that it's going to darken everything. Okay, let's get these spots. Let's maybe tile these 10 times. Let's see what we get. Okay, I think decently looking a little like that. Maybe something a little more, something a little smaller. Obviously the height now is incredibly strong. I really liked what we had before. Something like this. Not 32, but maybe 10. And maybe triplanar. Okay. And let's go ahead and add those levels and clamps. Maybe we don't need the clamps. I mean, now I can see that better, and I think I need more tiling. So maybe let's do 15. And that's not looking too bad. Let's maybe, what, multiply from what we have? No, let's just scroll through because I'm not in the mood of applying logic today, unfortunately. Overlay works, but it just inverts. So let's just do linear dodge. And sorry, maybe play with these levels a little bit more. Okay, let's get the clamp effect. I think it will be good for this particular one. Yeah. So maybe 0.995 so that we cut just the edges of it. And I don't think it's worth it to do much else. Okay, so 50% seems like a little too much. We'll go 25 and we'll also go 25 over here. So what I want is an almost flat surface. The moment that you start to add all of that into the height, you can see how it's looking super crunchy. And I don't think that's what we should be having, that sort of crunchiness. So I'm going to go even lower than that. I think we're also misbehaving in the normals. So I'll do 2%. Let's see, no height. Yeah, that seems nice. And then maybe height of 10%, not noticeable, 15. Okay. I like that. That feels almost like a hammered metal, which is not far from what I want. Like you can see here, we're getting all these sort of bumps and so on, and it kind of feels like that's going to have it. And then maybe 15% over here as well, even like 5. Okay, I think I have what I need over here. It's a good base that I shouldn't be obsessing over. So, how do we move forward from this? So we need a method of somehow when we paint this damage, we want to use that same paint like process to also define these sort of darker areas. So if we break the layers of the material right now, what we're going to get is something like this. We have our brass, clean brass. That's going to be the most shiny layer. On top of that, I think maybe we can name it whatever. On top of that, we're going to have the paint. Okay. And in between, we have these sort of layers over here. The If we could draw a line here that goes from zero to 100%, right? That's opacity. Like right here at the middle, we have this darkening where the paint has kind of worn out, but not so much. But we also have an effect going on that obviously this paint protects the brass. And one of the things that is probably the most transformative for a metal is going to be grease, some sort of grease, and obviously water, right? Well, I mean, if you figure out how somebody's holding this camera, thumbs are around this area. So that's why this is so worn out right there, because somebody's like rubbing this off with their thumbs. So we have two options. It's either grease that's creating this sort of patina effect, but I would say it's more like this is just not totally worn out paint, and that's what I'm going to go for. And maybe we can look for references for some metal patina and kind of like improve on reality. This is one of the things that I always suggest to my students is like, don't just stop at your references, try to find some detail that is improving reality, improving, because at the end of the day we're artists, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to create something that improves on our daily life or somehow interprets it, right? So this interpretation could be some patina, because at the end of the day that's what I'm doing right now. I'm interpreting what's happening to this material. So back to the original thought. I have to figure out a way to paint out this while creating the halfway worn out paint. Okay. If I want to tweak, because I don't want to leave this to chance. That's a really good question, Jack. Let me go with that in a second. Um, if we leave this to chance, so pretty much I have my brass on the top or my paint on the top, and I add some like white mask, and okay, I have some normal maps and stuff interfering here. That paint should be replacing. That normal map should be replacing also. That is not making any differences because that's on pass through. That's not on pass through. I should leave it on pass through. And the texturing also, I'll leave it on pass through. Also for the height, let's leave it on pass through most likely. And somehow I'm still getting, is that a white mask? Somehow I'm still getting all from the, so height is replacing, sorry, we might not have height on this base, correct? All right, cool. So if again I leave this to chance, something's going on with the channels because this is a little bit too dark. I do believe that I have a normal channel over there. All right, I'll figure that out in a second. But if I leave it to chance, I might not be able to control this effect in a beautiful way. It might just be something controlled with a brush, and I don't think I want to do that. So I'm going to go against logic. Or sorry, am I going to go against logic? Yes, I am. I'm going to go against logic. So if I put my paint first, hold on. Yeah. So I'm thinking about anchor points. If I anchor my paint on the top, then I will not be access it. I will not be able to access it from the bottom. So I won't be able to tweak any of these on the brass, which at the end of the day is what's being uncovered and what I want to create interest on, because paint is just black. Brass is what's having all these details. So I'll have to have my paint, I'll have to have whatever I use to mask out at the bottom of my brass. And I'm thinking about Jack's questions, and I'm getting a little distracted, but I'm gonna go ahead and answer it. Jack is asking, how do you collect the vocabulary for what the things are called? I mean, this is a little bit of like probably like a chronically online person problem for a really long time. So if you go into my YouTube history, probably a lot of the stuff that you will see is stuff like how it's made. People like Forged on Fire, for example. Um, a lot of like construction videos, people making models like toys and like scale models like Warhammer stuff. So I do watch a lot of those videos. Like if we could collect my whole history for YouTube, probably I've spent on YouTube like probably 3 out of 10 years, right? It is a long time spent on YouTube. So I kind of have experience at hearing, and I always watch these in English or most of the time. And I have a lot of experience watching these videos. Hey, so I pick up some vocabulary, and I of course I recommend this, but it's a long time that you have to spend watching these videos. But like first of all, I think the biggest key is it has to be interesting for you. If it is interesting for you, you'll pick up all the vocabulary. Like I know English because I was reading skateboarding magazines, and they were, of course, printed in English, and also YouTube videos from skaters and interviews and stuff like that. And that's how I picked up my English. So probably a lot of my vocabulary also developed from those interviews, and maybe some of the accent outside of the Spanish. So it has to be interesting first. If it's not interesting, probably you'll be distracted and want to quit right away. Hey, Miguel. And so I guess ref search takes us to strange and interesting places. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so that's how my paint should look. But having the brass at the base is changing stuff. So I'm going to check per channel. Nothing on the base color. Metallic. Okay, I have no metallic on the paint. So on the base, I'm going to make sure that my metallic is set to 0. Okay, and now I'm not seeing any differences, but I still have my brass. So again, I'm gonna go against logic, and I want to have my brass on top. Now it's replacing my normals, I think. Let's do here that normal detail thing so that I can see my normal map. I picked up a lot of my English through rap music as well, Jack. Yeah. Froggy Small Legs. Hello. That's a fun name. I like it. So again, going against logic, we're having the paint layer in the opposite place that it would be in reality. But if we don't, then we will not be able to access pretty much what we're doing with this layer, sorry, with this mask inside of our brass, which is what I want to do in order to develop these colors. At least that's my initial logic, which might be broken in a second once I start making mistakes or it's not working or something. So I'm going to set this up. Black mask on the brass, white mask on the paint, anchor point on this, fill on brass, and let's pick up the paint anchor point. So what are we doing here? We're having the same mask in the paint and the brass, but the brass will be inverted. Okay, so now when I start painting here below my anchor point, so if I do here my add details, you can see that I'm essentially painting on the brass. Okay, so it is working. Now, super important, this layer is going to be very, very sharp. The one for the paint. It's always super sharp. It's not very sharp here. If we assume that this is the in-between, you know, the 50% that we were talking about here, paint and brass mix. But because I have this anchor point, I can do certain things. Okay, so for example here, if I bypass if I do levels now, okay, I'm controlling both, and I can make it very sharp. But if I bypass my anchor point, now I can be making the paint layer very, very sharp. Like maybe, let's try to get that. That should not be, like, that's crazy that it's changing it's changing the look just because, well, of course it is because it's affecting that. Okay. So essentially where I'm going with this is I can have two methods of controlling this. So I can control the sharpness of my paint and I can control the sharpness of my transition for the brass. And that's probably the first step that I'm going to want to take for this. But I really can't do that just yet because of the system that I have. Okay, so my logic is breaking a bit. Let's see, let's see. I don't think I need that layer, the levels right there. I think the only one that I need is right here. But I know for sure that what I want on this brass right here is a very sharp layer. Okay, so let's reset this and let's bring both to the center so that where I'm painting, it's kind of accurate. Obviously that's super ugly. We can like maybe clean it up, like get something maybe like that. And obviously that's just placeholders so that we can build this material. Okay. This transition. And the cool part about this is that now in my brass, I can get some pass through on the base color, for example. Let's see, pass through on base color. Again, that renders all the information onto this layer. And I can do so metal darken. Let's do some levels over here. Maybe get that metal to have like a slightly different look. Let's get some HSL. Again, just randomly, not so much randomly, but loosely trying to create like this sort of effect. Maybe we should shift back to oranges. And then if I use a black mask, again with a fill coming from my paint mask, now I should be able, there you go, to control the borders that flow in. Okay, so I can kind of paint, you can see that it's very exaggerated and it's obviously not very well controlled, but we are generating exactly this effect. So the moment we create a good mask, so let's try doing this. Hold on. Let's try doing this properly. And in here, unfortunately, I can't be using some default alphas because I don't think we have very good default alphas. I guess what I can do is throw in something for free. So I was not planning on doing this, but if we were to go into image selection, open source, this is a very high resolution image that we could use as some sort of, how do you call this? Projection base. So I'm going to save this image as something. I'll save it on my downloads and right away drag and drop into Substance Painter. I'll do texture. This is going to go into, maybe I can do, do I need a folder for this? I'm trying to keep my shelf very organized. Hello, hello. So, okay, I'll just do what? Nothing for now. We'll figure it out later. Let's put it on the project for now. Because I mean, it's very project specific also. Okay, so quickly, and outside of this, I'm going to create a paint layer. I'm going to call this projection or mask projection. I'll name it properly once I figure out if I'm going to paint more in that layer or not. And if I use this brush over here, projection, and isolate the base color, put this on the base color, and kind of match what's going on. I mean, it's quite difficult to see what is below. And this is obviously not aligned in terms of like perspective. Let's quickly get rid of the mask, the black paint. Okay. I mean, it's actually not bad whatsoever. Let's do something like this. Okay, we get the little R. We already have that from our markings. So I don't want this. So if I don't want this, what I can do is just maybe rotate, opa, rotate maybe, and then reproject this area. They're certainly not the easiest to adapt to the surface, but maybe, we can get some interesting variation from there. Okay, I'll rotate it a bit more. And I'm going to try to join those two right there. Okay, how's that looking? I mean, not great, not bad. So from this projection, I can do a few things. I can go filter, I can do HSL, remove the saturation. I can do levels and generate some sort of mask. I wouldn't want to like have too much black or white, so I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to anchor now. So this can be a mixed effort, okay? I'm just doing this to quickly have some space to kind of test my blending, but it's also probably something that I can keep for my final texture. So if I were to have really good references, like really, really good references that maybe are super flat or something, like I could be projecting these sort of details. For example, here I have I could flatten this with affinity. This is also quite flattened, so I could take a look at this maybe and use it for something like this. Also, like this top plate projection also looks quite usable. Not the front, not the back, not the sides. But hey, who knows? Maybe yes. For now, this wheel is going to be useful. Okay, so I'm going to group this at resources, texturing resources. I'm going to be using these for various purposes. Okay, and then I can come back to this. I'll bring my markings over. And let's try to take that into my texture. So I'll have to do this here on the paint because that's what I'm using as a base in order to process further. So let's ignore this paint layer for now. And let's do this with a fill. And that fill, I don't want these resources so far. That fill, I'll bring in my, how did I call this? I don't know, mask projection. Okay. And that's incredibly sharp right now. It's not looking great. It was looking very good on the projection itself. Like that was looking decent. But right here, it's not looking so good anymore. So what's happening now is we're not controlling the thickness of our paint. So it just looks super wrong and broken. But if we look at this over here, there's like such a thin layer of height. So it is important to balance this out before we do anything. I'm just going to do this on the entire group. I'm going to add levels to the entire group of the brass and just go into the height and try to maybe flatten that quite a bit. Almost even maybe to the point where I almost have nothing. So we don't have a base height apparently. So let's just get it there. Okay. That base height is going to be 0, which is going to make this problem appear again. But now I have a little bit of info, or I should be having it to correct the height. Why is this not working? My height's on linear dodge. I think it should be on replace. Not working, not working. Why is that? Okay, I'll use my eyes and not the channels because I feel like it is doing something. It's just maybe not updating. I just never had that issue before, and I'm going to trust that I've never had that issue. Okay, so from here, I might be able to play with this a bit. I feel like the projection is super strong. It's not looking great. It's looking super shiny also. Let me, so I'm trying to make a decision here for what I want to keep. And all of these like differences in the materials, they're distracting me from actually looking at just the transition. So if you need to go back and fix something, you go back and fix something. And I think we can all agree that's difficult to read. But now I have an easier time at reading the same thing that I'm reading at my references, or at least a base that's closer to that. Motivated MTV, how do you do stitches? Unfortunately, today I'm not going to be covering something like this, but at some point I might for maybe a different model. Sorry about that. If it were a quick answer, I would do it. I mean, the quickest way that I can think about is grabbing some sort of fill and using the generator for stitches. UV UV checker, no, this is not the one. Auto stitcher. And then using auto stitcher, you could play with some generated stitches. So if you find that, you could play with that, but essentially in Designer and closer to that. Okay, so let's figure out the blending here. All right, so I have my paint going on here, then I'm capturing that on my brass. So just going through, why is this so big? Why is my viewport so small? I am way too used to working on small on small viewports. So I feel like I don't want this anywhere really, but whatever. Um, right. I feel like I'm losing my focus a bit. So we have these resources, and in this base color, we might be introducing a little bit too much sharpness. If it's not there, maybe we're introducing these at these levels, correct? So these levels are sharpening things a bit too much. I might not want this. Because if I create good alphas, I can play a lot with them. You can see here how I almost can go from like this to this. Similar, okay? Um, Keyword is similar. All right, so let's figure out the color, the secondary color. So now if we darken this metal, that's my texture there, that's my texture there. I'll need to invert it. Let's actually reset and invert. And let's try playing with these levels. So right now, I'm checking between two very similar materials. That's, well, difficult to see again. So maybe if I go and make this, yeah, blue, completely different color, I can figure out the where is what. I can clearly see that my mask is inverted now, so I can invert it and play with that. I can even play a little bit with levels, so I can just reset these levels. Filter, blur. Just blur these a little bit. But with this extra blur, now I'm surely going to be able to play a lot with those levels. As you can see right there. Now I can expand that boundary quite a bit. So in a way, let's see. Let's create something semi-sharp. Maybe something like that. And now going back to our HSL, we can leave this at 0.5. We could also play with roughness coming from here. We have nothing going on our roughness. Nothing going on. It's a very, very, very boring roughness. So this effect is going to be as boring as that is. So we should probably work on that on the base layer. But for now, I can also go into my roughness channel, go ahead and set that to pass through and add some levels to the roughness to kind of maybe make that a little bit more Let's see. Where is that affecting? Yeah, I want to make that a little bit. Yeah, we can really see that now. We couldn't see that before because of roughness metallic. So now it's time to really push and get the values correct. So it is kind of crazy, but we're in a similar place. Obviously, we don't have the same breakup. We could quickly have it. Maybe in this projection layer. I'm starting to lose myself. A lot of layers, so I'll try to be, let's see. I'll try to be as organized as I can. I can grab this projection and create a secondary paint. So with this paint, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to try to project around the R. So I do have those markings already, but maybe it's interesting to match them and project them together. I don't know. I feel like I can get that close, and that is not bad at all. Okay, I projected that a bit too much. Let's get just on the R over here. I feel like that feels natural. And then I can of course paint with some black or white, or because I have two paints and I'm projecting two different things, I can even use my eraser tool now. Maybe, well, erase around there if I don't want that or so on. So I have some level of control here, which is always something that I might desire. So guys, again, like I'm not looking into stitches right now, so I wanted to provide a starting point. But if you want some high quality stitches, like you're gonna have to work for stuff. Like as you can see here, something as simple as like a gradient around the detail is something that I have to work hard for. So that's a start. And I'm sure like you'll find techniques here that could be applied to something similar to this, to your stitches. Sorry. Like projecting stitches might not be maybe the best thing, but using alphas to create stitches might actually be. So I don't know. It is going to be up to you to develop those techniques. For me, that creating stitches like that always held up. But again, I don't want to distract from the main topic. Maybe one day we can do stitches. I would be I would be happy to do that. All right, so let's go back to this. So that's looking like this. So when we don't have a lot of detail, this becomes extremely boring. Like you can see that I think this is boring. Yeah. When we have detail, when we have alpha, that becomes interesting. So what this is telling me is that when we apply this to the larger areas, we're still going to have a boring base texture. So the best that I can do right now is probably detail my brass a bit more. So I have a base that I'm quite comfortable with over here, and I feel like that could already be somewhat complex. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to enable maybe color on the mold here and add that same thing, maybe called grunge rust fine. So let's look for it over here, maybe. Not sure why everything's getting so small and this is so big again. Grunge rust fine. So I want this one, right? Yeah. Okay. So we saw in the previous episode how creating noises can be very powerful. This is not something that I'm going to be doing every single time. Sometimes these noises are created for me, and these grunges are very detailed black and white images. So if I can save me some time, I'll try. I'm going to quickly add a fill layer, and I'm going to make this white. And that's so that I can see my brass. So I think right now I'm not seeing that because, yeah, I'm darkening this metal and maybe something else is going on. I think not. I think, yeah, that mold is just replacing. And right now it is at a very large scale, 32. So I might want to actually separate this. So I'll just call this color variation, separate height from base color. That's completely fine. I'll get rid of base color on this mold, get rid of height on this one, and I can probably go back to something like 10. Maybe not 10, 20. Thing is, what I never want to see is so much repetition. So I can see my texture one, two, so here one, two, three, four times already on the same surface. That's not good. Okay, if I can see it maybe only twice, that's maybe decent, but maybe also I could do better than that. I'm doing UV projection. I'm going to go for dry planar. And again, I don't want to see the repetition. So maybe twice. And that could be a decent start. I'm going to do this at the top because this is all that I'm doing for the height. And why not? I can do this also for the roughness maybe. Same texture. I think that's going to make things a little interesting. And now it's a matter of, well, let's go for the color first. Gradient. And I think I showed this the other day, like you can capture a little square, apply it as like a gradient dynamic. This time I'm going to use something different. I'm going to go into the like regular gradient. Of course, the first one is going to be the color that I liked, that I know that I like. Okay. And then maybe let's start from that point and just change it slightly. Maybe a little bit of darkness, a little bit more orange, and a little bit more saturation. And over here, we can just do the opposite, maybe a bit more. I don't think I want to go for more yellow. Maybe just darkness and saturation. Yeah, maybe actually color also. Okay, I don't think I need more than 2 colors over here. So I'm going to use these 2 colors and move this all the way up. So that should make things a bit more interesting when it comes to color. And now it's time to figure out the roughness. So of course, like toning it down will help. I'm just playing randomly until I find something that looks decent. I don't think I like that for the roughness. I might just remove that for now. Maybe it is a bit too much of a distraction. That gradient feels like it's not doing a lot also. So let's go with something like this. So how's that looking now? Still boring, but it's better. Okay, so we're coming from here to here and we have a little bit more going on. It is still boring, but that sort of boring might be easy to fix with painting actually. So maybe not painting. Let's not go for the manual labor just yet. Let's try a second. Hold on, I'm not doing this darken. Yeah, so that's super dark now. Super dark. Careful. Maybe disabled. Okay. Okay, maybe saturation. We don't want to go to the reds so much. Feel like I'm going to the yellows too much. Let's do 505. What colors am I creating? Red and yellow. So I want to stay in oranges. I might ditch the levels and just create like darkness with the lightness slider. Because I don't think I want to be adding like that type of contrast. Okay, and now kind of close. Again, let's not obsess over the details. If I look at this from like a normal view distance, that is a really good result, except for the R area. which again, we could maybe like get a little more from it from fixing the projection here. Like somehow getting a little bit more detail over there. I mean, super I'm not super on that because with that, yes, I'm fixing the wheel, but I'm not fixing the material itself. So let's try to create a bit more of these patches maybe. So how can I do that? I think I'm going to duplicate this metal darken and I'm going to call it random, metal darken random. And I think rather than doing this way, I'm going to add a fill layer in which I can add some sort of grunge. I'm using the same grunge all the time. That makes things a little bit more interesting now. So it's telling me I'm going in the right direction. Maybe a little bit of levels to this mask and creating something that does like this, super strong as a detail. And it's also removing roughness. So one thing that I do if I want to control all channels at once, it's maybe using levels. So that's kind of like removing, like it's making your mask blacker. Or if you want to have some one-click type to control, I will add a fill, call it opacity, set it to multiply. And now if it's white, it's at full opacity, and if it's black, it's at no opacity. So what I'll do is just have it probably at 0.45. Okay, so decent place to be. Of course, we're nowhere near polishing. We've been at this for around an hour, among other things, so I can't expect to have a perfect material in such short amount of time. I mean, you can have it in 10 seconds if I were doing a YouTube Shorts, but we all know that's probably not very realistic. Okay, I'm going to attempt to create this projection, and maybe for free, I'm going to get also some of these details. I don't know. So again, attempt is probably the keyword right there. Well, hold on. Okay, that does something. That is showing up. That's showing up at the edges. That's why they were a little bit too bright. Okay, no problem. Noted. I'll make sure I label them as hide so that something calls like catches my attention. So I'll do this in the base. And right now what I have is this one over here. So I might be able to project some other details from that projection. So I'm going to go again into my projection brush. I'm going to try. Oh no, this is a different image. Okay, so I'll try to get this one then. So to image selection, open source, and let's save this image and bring it into the project once again. So texture to the project, and I'll use this as my base color projection. This feels like cheating, I've been told many times. This feels like cheating. Kind of agree. So something that can be done is you can try to match your perspective. So if you go into the, I think it's here in the somewhere around the viewport settings, there should be an opacity for the stencil. So stencil display opacity, we can pull it down. Okay, and maybe if we make our model just temporarily, let's make it, I don't know, let's put it all the way to the top maybe. I think that's necessary actually. We can put it just above the miscellaneous. Okay, and maybe I can make it some color that shows my reference. Something like that, red. That's not the one. Oh my God. Let's go back to projection. Okay. I mean, a bit more readable. So maybe that sort of angle. Probably you spend more time matching your entire picture than just projecting bit by bit. Let's get the whole thing. Let's do F6, I believe is, whoopa. Yeah, F6 creates the orthographic projection, which is closer to this camera, and like, yeah, it is closer to this. And I'm decently close to being able to project right away. But I don't feel like it's necessary to go that far. Maybe just again matching bits. If you feel more comfortable, another option is you can get this image, like you can like capture this um, and work in Photoshop with this image and just project it from like a top perspective, maybe. So you can take a screenshot of your model and project from there. I think that is close to being perfectly aligned for the advance. Okay. And then do we need more? Do we need to project more to keep tweaking? I don't think so. Maybe for this area over here, we can get a little bit of this as maybe a reference. Again, we don't have to project everything, so if something is out of place like it is over here, we can just remove this projection. Okay. I think I'm also going to, hold on, erase this little dot because it's not exactly at the same place. Again, if I wanted to, I could just align it. So I love projections because of this. They make things easy, and they might look low res here, but when you project, when it's time to projecting, they will be fine. One thing you should be super careful of is like these are camera projections. So when you turn the camera away, you're gonna get a lot of artifacts like these. So you're probably gonna want to come in with some sort of maybe a second perspective, second camera, something like this. All right, so let's quickly check what this is doing to our mask. It's creating a decent amount of interest. As you can see, like we're gonna have to fix. So on my black paint, this is filling, I can add paint, add, set this to linear dodge. And now I should be able to, okay, so we're doing this the inverse way. Subtract, okay. And then when you paint white, you can fix all of this. So I'm gonna take it that this is completely worn out. That's an area where like I have a similar camera to this and it's fairly new and it is already wearing out quite heavily in this part. So it's the area that wears out the most. Also shown by the reference. I'm not making that up. Okay, so we're quite close there. I want to see from this perspective. Okay, you can see how that is also quite strongly worn out. So maybe we can fix it by painting like that. And maybe here I can add some other paint, add paint, and call it sub, so subtract. And if I set this to add, because we're working inversely, again, capturing and reprojecting, I'll be able to remove from here. Okay, so how's that looking? That is creating some interesting effect. And it's kind of like, I feel like I'm like straight away, I am projecting some sort of scan, you know, like I baked this. Like this is some complex and maybe glorified way of like, not glorified, but maybe this is just a complexified way of baking something. So I'm baking my references into my model. Again, I'm not sure if that's bad or good. Like the results will tell. So far, it's really making the process very simple. Like really simple. I'm getting some really nice. Maybe this looks a little bit too much like a shadow, a little strange, you know. Like I'm sure we could improve this a lot, but it is creating a very interesting effect. So if we go ahead and maybe play with this blur, like we can get more of that, less of that, but it does look a little bit like a shadow, unfortunately. And that's not exactly the well. I was gonna say it's not exactly the effect that I'm getting, but it kind of is. It's maybe not so strong in the opacity. Let me check the reference over here. So there's more going on. We have this sort of scaling layer, which we definitely want to include as well. But I think what I need is blurring my results here. Um, hold on. At some point, this is becoming overly sharp. Yeah, I somehow have to um, I somehow have to get rid of that line of pixels if I want this to look right, because that line of pixels is, again, reference is counter intuitive here, but it or sorry, contradicting me, but that line of pixels, it is there. So we have a like the way we're constructing this mask is giving us those results, but improving. It's not improving on reality. So somehow, maybe by maybe by not worrying about it right now and leave this for some polish phase, we can we can tell if that's such an important issue or not. And my bet is that like it's not. And by the way, this is this is not limited resolution. Like if I go up 4K, like I should be able to see like an improved mask. That's gonna take some time, but that mask that I'm painting should be based on a very high quality projection. So I should see all those details being projected. It's not going to, or it should not disappear. Okay, as you can see, that has quite a lot of detail in there. But view distance is key. Okay, so let's keep projecting. Let's keep projecting because part two of this was projections, not polish. And I'll keep repeating that as long as I keep forgetting it. And probably it is something that you should do yourselves. Like try not to obsess with these things. Okay, so we will be projecting this one now. And after I project this one, I want to show you how we can achieve like maybe results that are a little bit like not so much identifiable with the references. Because if somebody finds these references, they're going to essentially find your model, right? Or they're going to be able to replicate it very easily. And that's not so desirable most of the time. Like you don't want if this camera is, for example, like it reminds me of something that maybe Indiana Jones would carry. So if this was on the new Indiana Jones game, um like I'd be able to replicate it and be like, and that's maybe not so desirable. So we want to transform this. Thanks, Marius, and welcome to the stream. Always good to have you, man. All right, let's get that. I was doing this from somewhere else. Remember going into my folders. Yeah, I think I was dragging and dropping from this. Again, texture to the project, and we're just gonna project this. Let's choose that. And again, roughly match like the perspective to the reference we are projecting from. Close enough. You can tell I use different references for modeling. Well, of course, why would you model from incomplete or non-planar sort of like references? Okay, so super easy, like almost like really it feels like cheating, but you can get that effect Oh, I have projected this incorrectly. Sometimes I really wish like things were like in Marmoset, where if you undo, you might be undoing your camera instead of um, your actions. Okay, no, but I feel like that projection isn't too bad. I think we should develop the practice or the habit of projecting with the white layer on top, because we can see like over here I had some unprojected areas. Here I have some unprojected areas. Let's match the edge a bit better, maybe more like that. And that's not so great. All right. And that feels nice. Maybe, yeah, we can do this from the front. So right click, images, selection, open source. And I'll just get this detail, the entire front part. Because I obviously like this being live, I have a limited amount of time. I could stay here forever, but no, I couldn't. So as long as we get the point, job done. And I'm not getting many questions, which always unsettles me slightly, because I feel like, is this being too complex? Am I going too fast? Are people paying so much attention that, there's like rarely that's what happens. But hey, who knows, maybe. Okay, this one's going to be tough to match. So we're going to have to approximate this one. So how's that looking? Not good enough. I mean, it's also not too bad. So I think I can project this in multiple passes. So now I'll just match the line. I think a little bit more on the top. Hold on, I messed up right there. No, up. Hold on, I'll check wireframe. The wireframe is gonna give me a good point of reference. Where are you? Show mesh wireframe. Yeah, almost there. There we go. Okay. I think it's probably time to clean this up also. Hold on, what's going on up here? Okay, something else. So let's clean this up. Um, yeah, maybe a good idea would be to grab some sort of paint layer and then call it like cleanup. Because I know that what I want to clean up is either white or black. So I can just enable color. Okay, and just with, um, again, sorry, I was doing this on the eraser. If I enable white and then I press, not with this one. I thought that by pressing X I would get the black. So I can do this with a brush, like as long as I paint carefully and I'm kind of random around these edges, it is really effective at like cleaning all of this up. Like you can see it almost looks like that was there on my texture originally. I'm going to, yeah, probably should reproject that part. Okay, let's clean this up a bit. Let's disable the wireframe. Okay, and I can do this with some white color over here. Like if I want to have like a full projection, just clean that up again. And in here, black. And in here again, like if I draw carefully enough, I'll get a good area of that, of like definition of the damage. Maybe in here I want to No, I want to leave that in. That's right there. So why do I like this method? Um, One of the things that makes me like this so much is that I don't have to think. Um, and you might think, that's very lazy, but I mean it is. But it's also freeing because sometimes when you're texturing, you're thinking about so many things at once. And one of those things that you're thinking is like material definition, and then are these details placed correctly? Am I following my reference correctly? Is this looking pretty? Like so it's like you're making a lot of decisions. Um, this frees you up from that, and I enjoy that because again I can focus on things one at a time. This might not be final. It's just a really good way to see that my materials are looking right, and if I really like what's happening, I also understand what my needs are in the following steps of the process. So I need these types of alphas. I need like this amount of gray. I need this amount of white and all that blah blah blah. That really frees up your mind very nicely. Okay, so I'll disable my cleanup here, and I'm going to project that part. Well, no, I'm seeing that it might be a little. Well, yeah, let's try. Let's not give up before trying. So match edge to edge, something like that, and paint. So okay, there's something right there at the top, and I'll not be doing that just right now. But the rest of this I do want. Okay, so now on the cleanup, I'll clean it up. So that should be all black. And now I'll quickly come in with my eraser and make sure that this is clean enough. And just here for the end of the line, I'll be careful with creating some sort of believable end. Okay, that looks quite right. I'll paint black over here on this for now. That's quite, you know, like easy to replicate. Okay, and that looks like a lot of damage. Not sure I like it too much. Okay, so that we should be looking for that. So how do I replicate that? I have some of it because again, we have those sort of spots. I'm not sure if this is, I'm not sure what this is, but I have this urge to like complete the feel of this, like keep doing this effect in order to really tell if I'm understanding this correctly or not. So I'm going to be quick at that. I'm going to clean this up because it's not matching the top the way I want it. So I'm just going to stop right there because I feel like that's where it is matching. I'm probably going to, let's see, play with the base color of that a bit. Yeah, look, that helps me with those effects a lot more. And that's why I'm saying that this is about understanding your needs. And now I'm understanding that in order to get this, the mask that I need looks close to black, when I want that sort of effect, which is, I guess, decently close to that. I can use two levels if I feel more comfortable, and I think I do. Okay, maybe. Whoa, that's tough. That's difficult. What one thing I could do is add another sort of like paint in order to create some, let's see, adjustment. So if I paint black on multiply, for example, okay, sorry, black on multiply, probably not the right one. Let me check that again. Yeah, sorry, I want to go towards white. So black on, sorry, white on linear dodge. It's gonna look like I'm removing that detail for a moment. But if I start to play with the opacity, I'll start to get that detail in and out. That outline is super distracting. Super distracting. Yeah. I don't think it's so great. Maybe like that, and again, it's about understanding the needs. And this is helping very much. So right now I don't have that outline anymore. It's true that like now my raw material doesn't look as interesting as this. Yeah, I think I have a good side view over here. I mean, of course, I could project this to the side. Super easy and get that. So I can do, again, image selection, open source, save image as, save it, and then get it over there. Ah, wrong place. So I see a lot of people dropping the stream. That's completely fine, of course. But I would like to hear your feedback. Obviously, the ones that are staying are not going to give me the feedback for those who are leaving. But is this like digestible? Is what I'm trying to understand. More like maybe I'm going too much around in circles. Something I tend to do. That's why I'm mentioning it. But I feel like it is giving us good progress to be doing this. Let's be careful with the cleanup and adjustments. And the stencil opacity. I want to get it right. Okay, I did that wrong. I need to undo. And I'm going to be doing this in this other paint because if I do that with the paint, I'll have the chance to fix it, to erase it later. So I think that's good. Okay, now I don't think there's a need to erase anything. Okay, not bad. Um, yeah, this cleanup needs to be most likely. Oh my god. Yeah, this cleanup needs to be erased in this area. Nice. Okay. Uh, not loving. I'm not loving that idea of like playing with the levels. I feel like we were in a very good spot before. I kind of blew it a little. I have a double projection there. So no feedback. Everything's going great and this is the best tutorial you've ever seen. Okay, I'm going to quickly fix that. I don't think I can live with it. And surely like this is not the ordinary stuff that you see in like texturing tutorials. Like I know that 100%. When Substance Painter was introduced, a lot of people, like a lot of people, started to get very used to procedural workflows. Um, I know a lot of people see this and think, "Whoa, that's cheating" or whatever. like this was texturing before Substance. Like you would do photo based texturing for everything that you wanted realistic. Actually, that's like so true. You even have people discovering the texture. So what texture did they use in, for example, Half-Life? I don't know if I'll find it now, but yeah, look, texture sources. So that there's people that go to the places to capture the original textures that were placed in a game, right? So that's telling you how much we drew from photo based texturing, and it's I mean proof that it is super powerful. Like I could use this already, and I don't even have to go through what Miguel, come on, man. Like I can go through this on this paint, and well, essentially that minus the HSL is our base color. Like I don't even have to go through the, look at that. That looks a million times better. I don't even have to go through the effort of creating the material itself. You know, if I ever if I ever really want to be quick, that's the way. And of course, there is, stuff to do there. Like I'm getting rid of a lot of the height. But if you want to see like my thought process right now, like by showing you that I discovered that indeed it is a better texture. So let me quickly explore this. We can treat this like fully as like photo scan conversion and just get this into the base color from, let's see, where is this? This is called mask projection, but without the mask part. And these all should be cleaned up. We can do that with with masking. With the mask itself, we can do this. And if I take that into, for example, height, like I could bring that height. I think I will bring that height from here. So mask projection coming from the base color. You can see how that brings me those details. Maybe I'll need to invert it. Maybe I'll need to play with it a bit, like clamp some parts, play with other. Obviously, metallic needs to be enabled for the areas that are metallic. So like I could just convert this to the texture. I think I'm not going to do that, not going to do that 100%, but I definitely want to explore um, that option somehow. Hmm. Let me quickly add a fill here. Maybe just on the base color from that mask projection. And instead of grabbing it from here, I'm going to grab it from here. Fill, sorry, anchor point, mask projection. We'll call this like projection. Okay, so we'll call this from the projection. We have a decent base right there to start from. Maybe I can just like reduce the opacity. I feel like I'm like that's overkill. Maybe not such a good idea. Or maybe yes, I don't know. Like again, a thing to explore and to fix. Because right now we have too much going on the outside areas. But when it comes to the base color, it is providing like a really good approximation to what we're seeing here. Maybe a little too saturated, but anyways, let's not take the easy route just yet. Because this also gives us extra tools. Like what I said yesterday, you don't just want to project something and have a group of people being able to replicate like we just see on the Reddit, right? Um, so this gives me some other options. Like for example, I can add generators if I ever decide to do that, which is not a thing I usually do, but I could. So something like metal edgeware. And now if I invert it and I add it, sorry, subtract it this time. Like now I can have what I had before plus more of my own making. That looks horrible, but it is an option. So I don't want to take a route that removes my option too soon, too early. Yeah, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Like everybody like made those like tech nines, sorry, and like they like all the projections were coming from like pretty much the same reference. And I think that also happened with like some M4 magazine. Like you would see M4s and everybody would, or M16s or whatever, and everybody would be using the same projection for that magazine. And you could easily see that. So again, I think that's something that you don't want to give into too quickly, unless you're like in a huge rush or whatever, which I am personally not, and I've rarely been in such a big rush. We're missing spots. We are missing spots. So I am going to duplicate this, and on this grunge, do I have the height? I'll just figure it out. I think I need interest from my own textures, from the surface imperfections. I know I said that I would like to not use them because I wanted to be more leveled with what you guys could do, but it really is a great pack of textures and it gives so much. Like look at like how easily we can create like an effect like this. Overdone, of course, we need less opacity, but it really is making things very simply. We had Igor, Dan, and Mikhail. Okay. What's that? Sorry. Is that the people that were using the magazine alpha, the duplicate, or pretty much like the one that looked the same? What's that field? Oh, temporary disabling. Yeah, I'm not super happy with that part. It's looking very strange. So I see. I mean, I don't think people copy. I think people get inspired, and a lot of the times, I think um, we draw from the same wells or whatever, inspiration from similar places, and you have to get into people's shoes. Like it's it's not easy, and it takes a long time to develop like these ideas and these methods. Like what I'm doing now, I haven't watched any tutorials. Like I naturally drew into this conclusion like after many years of trialing a shit ton of ways to get something. Um, so yeah, I think it's fine to practice something that someone else has done. Like we've all done tutorials. We've all done stuff like that, and it's a great way to learn. And I don't think I feel like copy right there is a little bit harsh, maybe. I'm gonna be painting out manually some of that darkening from right here. So I might want to keep it in some places, but maybe not in others. And I'm thinking about doing the same over here. Yeah, that cleans things up quite a bit. It kind of also removes a little bit of definition in some parts. definitely like these parts over here. They need that removed. So again, no fear to run out of the automated part. Like if that needs to be done, it's done. Thanks, Andreu. I'm kind of trying to find I'm trying to find the direction. It is challenging. I think I'm gonna go back to that thing that I had where I was painting out some areas and then bring them back with opacity. I guess what I was trying to say, like Ferha, I'm not sure how I can call you, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that like people learn like that, and we should be okay with it rather than maybe removing the merit. Like having an original idea is difficult, very very difficult, and again takes a long time. And to me, it's okay if people watch my tutorials and then take what I do and do it exactly the same way. Like I see no problem with that. Call me Al. Okay. So Al, I think it's fine. Like we should be comfortable with people taking our work as inspiration and our methods as inspiration. Like I generally see no issue with that. Okay, I'm having a lot of trouble replicating this effect. Um, what if before painting it out, I capture it? I'm gonna call this mask projection before the cleanup, mask projection soft. And then I'm going to use it again. And that's kind of weird. That should have disappeared. What? Have I moved the wrong one? Yes. Okay. So mass projection and mass projection soft. I use anchor points a lot. Okay, so I'm going to try to drive this in more as like a direct projection. So maybe, just maybe, let's get a little fill layer here that I can bring in the base color from the projection. Okay. And then I can add a black mask with a fill coming from the projection soft. Okay, decent. I'll invert this. Okay, very, very decent. Now I feel like I'm getting close to that. So if you're lost, like I probably would be, what I did is let's see, I grabbed this in the base color, okay, the projection that we used, and I'm trying to just mask it out in the areas where I think I need to recover it, which is here. So I have various anchor points. For some reason now this fill is not showing in the mask. Why is this happening? Let's do projection soft. Okay, it's not showing. Perfect, great. What's going on? Mask. There we go. Why? Okay, now it is showing. You've got a lot of bugs. Okay, and I can get all of that from here and now use some paint layer to just decide what areas I want this in and which areas I don't want that. So I just want that on the like very center. So I don't think I want to be maybe also yeah, maybe not here and not anywhere like that. How's that? Yeah, not there either. So essentially just over here. And that, of course, should be affecting the roughness somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be translating that base color into the roughness, again, by grabbing that projection and just saying, come from the base color. Of course, the base color, that area is darker. So when we bring it to the roughness, it's going to also be darker. What I want is that it's lighter so that it replicates this effect a bit closer. And maybe something like that is a little better. And I don't think this is as metallic because again, we have a very rare case in which metallic is not going to be either white or black. In those cases, I mean, we have to justify this with logic very well. Obviously, we have a half-worn layer of paint. So if we want that to be representing properly, you can see how non-metallic is representing that really, really well. But I'm going to go for 0.25 because I want to show some of that metalness through. So when I go into my metalness or my metallic map, we're going to have the same color as we do in these areas that were projected, in which we have pretty much different opacities. I think it's time to clean this up. So let's go into the projection and clean it up. Exactly not like that. All right. Be careful not to paint those areas, and probably here it's better to grab the UVs. There you go, and just start to clean up areas a bit more like that. I want to remove that. And these are really good details. I mean, like probably now the few issues that we're having is with balancing the materials. But when I look at the base color, right? Like that's interest right there. That's looking good on the base color on the isolated channel. When I look at the metallic, that's looking also quite crisp. When I look at the roughness, I'm also seeing like nice variation. So it's about balancing all of them so that they look perfect. So let's go ahead and do that with probably our projection recover. I feel like we have so many layers for things that might not be so necessary. I mean, how's that looking? Not so great. Yeah, I feel like that is now taking away more than it's giving. So that's probably one of the issues. I mean, it's good on the base color, but if you look at the roughness, that falls, that kind of feels out of place. So what I'm going to do with this metal darken is most likely just either remove the roughness effect or like tone it down a lot. And you can see how that helped. I didn't remove it completely, I just removed the roughness. And that affecting the base color only is kind of like the balance that I think we needed. Very nice, very, very nice. And because we're controlling our mask in like many places, like you could think, oh, that's super messy. And in a way, yes. But in another way, it enables us to tweak things from multiple places. I'm going to keep this, but also not having in the roughness. I'm going to have it at 0% in the roughness, maybe. Hold on. No, actually, that roughness. Yeah, that we could do something good there. I mean, whatever. Let's not do roughness there. It's looking good on the base color, but not so much on roughness. Like that base color is very nice. Of course, like we just like copied it. We just grabbed it from here. Um, projections, like you might think, oh, that's just carrying the shape of that curve, right? But you can apply them to many different places. So this over here, what we have is essentially a semi-curve. So if I find another semi-curve that has maybe something similar, let's say, for example, this one right there. So if I wanted to detail this part, I could also use that part of the projection. So in here is where I start to mix or blend the workflow between alphas and fully projected textures, like we've seen like with the half-life effect example, very briefly, in which like, I have what I have here, what I have in this layer, the mask projection layer is pretty much a conversion inside of Substance Painter of a photo, full color photo, into a mask and also a color projection. Okay, so let's quickly, I'll do this over here on this paint and I'll show you what I mean. So I'll take this part and I'll take the appropriate, let's see, so this we should go into the project. I'll take the appropriate view, which I think is this one, and I'll just try to match. And that looks like low res, but like these are super high resolution textures. They're probably higher resolution than um, they're higher resolution than my textures. You should always ensure that that's going to be the case. If you don't, you doesn't matter how good of a textile density you have, your texture is gonna not look so great. So for example, over here, so I can just maybe take that and project it as like that's the damage on that area. Okay, and essentially, again, after some cleanup, and that's a very like the first example that I could find. But after some cleanup, that's pretty much we're just creating an alpha that is also projecting color and all of that stuff. So it's kind of like a alpha on steroids. I don't want to do that right now. I want to look into closing the stream soon. And I think that like again, what was there for in the menu for day 2? I think oh there's a lot. Yeah. So we wanted to do where drafting. And I feel like that's mission accomplished. Maybe it hasn't happened for like the entirety of the texture. That's fine. Um, it's very dirty now. It has a lot of layers in and a lot of details where it shouldn't. Of course, that should be cleaned up by the end. I'm just trying to see if there's any quick wins, anything that I can just grab quickly and like that will like drastically affect the look of my model. I'm thinking maybe I could project the back corner over here just because like I feel like I'm done with explaining this. Maybe some room for questions with like obviously not done with this, but done with this part and like explaining the blending between the different layers. Little review, maybe questions. But other than that, I feel like we're quite close. Maybe fixing some of that height could help. I feel like we killed the height a bit much. Let's see. That's funny. That creates like the bubbling effect a little. That's not what I want to do. Huh. So something is replacing my height. Oh, I see. So we have height levels here. Yeah, I see. To kind of like kill. So I will not do that. I don't want to do that. I want to have my height and I think I want to fix my paint quickly. But with that, I'll finish. Okay, there we go. So that's my height. Let's leave that at 100% so that there's no misconceptions. Okay, and I do want this sort of strong height, I think. And I also think I want to tile it more. I can't tile it more. But if I tile it less, it looks like it's tiling more. So that's probably because I'm starting to break the effect. Scope view distance. And I think I need something more spotty. I know I'm breaking everything else. I'll be with this in a moment. I think this needs more tiling. Let's do 512 maybe. That's too much, but it lets me move things. So let's do 65 tiling. As long as it looks like that sort of noise, I'm happy. Probably linear dodge will go just for subtract. Yeah, not doing a good effect. Multiply maybe. I don't think so. Like linear dodge seems to be it. And I can see the tiling now. So let's yeah, maybe leave it at 32. 32 should not. I don't see it properly. I think at that point where you when you're tiling something so much, you're just looking for white noise. Like literally. Okay. So about fixing that, I don't think I'm liking that result. Like as a surface, I think I have too much. Yeah, and that needs proper balancing. No problem. So let's make sure that the paint has a base for the height that helps it stay a little flatter. Yeah, that's super crispy, man. Depends on the place also. It's kind of creating height or like depth. I mean, it feels more like a layer of something like it does here now. It's just like I always dislike that effect because it creates these sort of issues. So I think I want to get like closer. So black paint, okay. Mm, why did I turn into a cow right there? Let's see. Ah, that's tough. That's tough to balance. Yep, quite tough to balance. So maybe I do need those levels that I removed before on the levels. Sorry, on the height. It's just like if I have them there, it's going to flatten everything else. Okay, I'm rushing because I'm a little tired. I think looking at the height map. Yeah, okay. So I don't have a height in the paint for some reason. Okay. But why is that? Ah, because that's the brass. Brass is on replace. Good. And then the base of the brass again doesn't have a height layer. Okay, so with it, I cannot predict or control. So now at least I can control that. The problem is that it's difficult to visualize because things are going from -1 to 1 now. So this, or maybe even like further than that. So this black, like it's gonna take a while so until it gets to white. So not simple to do it like that. Do we have any sort of height here? I don't think so. Is something like this, is this any of these? Yeah, this is doing height, this is doing height. Okay, I should probably have separated this, or should separate it at some point. Because that mold is, yeah, okay, that's at 50% opacity. And that's why this is happening. Okay, just needed a second to figure out that. But now I'm struggling to understand why that is up and that is down. Well, of course, my paint might have a different height, so I'll just have to go to the base and pull it up. All right, there we go. Fixed. Now my height can be balanced properly. So let's do 0.001. That's crazy that it's Yeah, I guess the difference is too high. So I need to also adjust this. So I just want the smallest amount of highlight in that edge coming from the height. And I think that's kind of right there. Okay, one more thing that I'm going to do in these large areas, I want to keep projecting stuff. I mean, maybe that highlight will come into the projection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a paint and I'm going to set this or call this override. So I'm overriding this mask, which essentially should give me the chance to paint out like some of these parts and create like a little bit more interest in those flat areas. Like I don't have to go 100% for that. I could just paint those areas that I like. Maybe those I don't like. Maybe here I really do like it. Whatever, like I can do something like this and now bring down the opacity, which in return is going to bring a little bit more color variation. Probably this projection needs a little bit of hue saturation lightness because I think it's going to yellow a little bit too much. Maybe less saturation. Yeah, and I think with that I'm done for the day. Not perfect, not in a perfect place. I don't think as an artist I've ever been like in a place where I can say I'm in a perfect place. But I'm in a place where I am quite satisfied. I'll set this as linear dodge. I'm quite satisfied with the results that I have. And I think I have achieved quite a bit for the time I spent. Like if we were to replicate today's session across the entire surface of the camera, we would be done with the model quite soon. I'll give it like another 2 hours of doing that. And then of course, yeah, of course we need to do some cleanup for the projection. Like some areas over here, they look a little bit too like smooshed or whatever. But that's fairly decent. And now I feel more comfortable bringing a little bit of more detail or more of that detail through. And it doesn't have to be coming through in all areas also. I just need to figure out the way to bring it in more areas. And I think that I figured out also. And that is the override. So if I paint this, let's see. Not sure where that black area is coming from, but if I were to paint that out, yeah, that's from the projection, needs cleaning up. So I could use a soft brush. Okay, and maybe. Yeah, okay, so mess up between a couple of layers. Hold on. That's quite weird. So that's on linear dodge. That's on linear dodge on the height, not on this. So, okay, yeah, that's fixed. And then cool. Yeah, that's fixed. So I can do that over here. Perfect, 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 perfect. Cool. I got it. It's just like figuring out the order, the layers, all of that. But I think we're very close. Again, it's cleanup. It's cleanup time for a lot of these things. And that like really, really sucks. I think that should be wide. No. Yeah. That's what happens when you don't organize your layers and maybe you're trying to figure out other things, like explaining this to um, people live. Before every session, I always get a little bit nervous. It's funny. And when I say a little bit, I'm exaggerating for the low. I get quite nervous. But then I relax while as time passes, as you should, of course. Okay, so that is really adjustable. I'm not very happy with that line. I'll fix it. And with that, I will be done. I always say, I'll be done with this, I'll be done with that. And then I'm not. But this time I will. Let's sharpen it up, maybe like this. That holds a symmetry. So it will be difficult to get something that looks right. Maybe I can just like, yeah, I like that. I think I like that very much. And it's accurate to the reference. So, all right, save. And with this, we're done. We're not. We're not. We're never done. I don't know why I have this in two different textures. Um, Probably so that I can be done. I would like, yeah, okay. So it's just a lot going on, man. A lot of layers going on now. Probably at some point that's worth a very proper cleanup. Not sure why I'm unable to. Both on linear dot shouldn't react to black. I'll tell you what. It's good enough. Okay. Now we're done. Cool. So with that, we'll conclude this second episode. Um, that should be a lot of info on a very small part, really. I would have probably liked to go a little further with texturing, and maybe the setup was a little bit more confusing to me than it should have been. Um, but nonetheless, I think it's coming together nicely. Again, probably with it will need some polishing and some extra detailing in some areas. And we shouldn't treat this as more as a draft. Although again, I failed at that, at being critical with the time I'm spending on something. It's not a bad thing, but it's never I think it's never good to lose the grip like that. But anyways, let's not punish ourselves for it. Um cool. All right. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I see like there's no questions. Completely fine. Um if there's anything, maybe feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have soon. All right. Have a very good day, and I'll see you all on Friday, I think, for our vehicle modeling class. If anybody wants to join, that's going to be 9:30 a.m. Madrid time, so CET. And yeah, if not, next Wednesday to keep working on this beauty. All right. Have a good one. Bye bye.